Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Cabal by Clive Barker. Now, Cabal is actually a novella which was published as the first story of this collection, which is also called Cabal. Now, as a whole, I believe this collection is volume 6 of Clive Barker's Books of Blood series, but I'm not going to be reviewing the whole collection. I'm only going to be reviewing the actual novella Cabal, and basically, I want to say the first half of the book is the actual novel Cabal, and the rest are a bunch of other short stories by Clive Barker. Now, Cabal was published in 1988. Now, I'm not sure if this was originally published as a standalone novel, or if it's always been part of this collection. Now, Clive Barker is also the author of books like Weave World and Cold Heart Canyon and Mr. Be Gone, and he also wrote the book The Hellbound Heart, which was made into the movie Hellraiser. Now, Cabal follows a man named Boone, who's a man with a lot of deep psychological issues, and it turns out that there has been a series of murders happening, and Boone's psychologist, Dr. Deckard, actually convinces him that he committed the murders. So Boone tries killing himself by throwing himself in front of a truck, and he ends up in the hospital, but when he's at the hospital, he meets this man who tells him about this place called Midian, so now Boone is convinced that he belongs there. So Boone ends up getting away from the hospital and going to Midian, only to discover that Midian is actually a cemetery, and underneath the cemetery are all these creatures with supernatural powers, and Boone is confronted by a few of these creatures, and one of the creatures actually tries eating him, and it bites him, but he gets away, only to be confronted by his psychologist, Dr. Deckard, and then it's revealed that Deckard is actually a serial killer, and he was the one who actually committed these murders, and he only used Boone as a scapegoat, and he reveals all this to Boone, but unfortunately, he also convinced the police that Boone was the one responsible for these murders, so Deckard also led the police to him, so the police end up gunning Boone down and killing him, but because Boone was bitten by one of these creatures, he ends up coming back to life as one of them and joining them in Midian. But what happens is Boone's girlfriend finds out that Boone has come back to life, and she finds out about these creatures, and unfortunately Deckard also finds out about these creatures, so Deckard ends up telling the police about them, and now the police are going after these creatures, and the police chief is convinced that these creatures are some kind of demons, and he's convinced that he's on some mission from God to destroy these creatures, and now it's up to Boone to protect these creatures who really just want to be left alone. Now, Cabal I thought was a very good book, and it's a monster story which definitely asks the question, who's the real monster? These creatures who really just want to be left alone, or the humans who are trying to kill them? And it's a story which definitely goes into the theme about how humans in general seem to hate what they don't understand, and I hate to say it, even though this is a fantasy novel and nothing in this book can actually happen, I hate to say it though, that's kind of true about people in general. It seems like anything that is outside of the quote-unquote norm is deemed as being evil by society, so it's a very interesting story in that regard, and it definitely goes into a lot of those themes about how, society is kind of fucked up, to be honest. Now, the creatures in the story, you could almost look at them as being almost like vampires in a way, because in the book you realize that they're afraid of sunlight, but at the same time, they're not really vampires. If they are vampires, it's definitely a very unique take on the vampire story, but in the book, they never once use the word vampires, though. In the book, they actually refer to themselves as the Nightbreed, Nightbreed. But the Nightbreed, they are definitely interesting characters. And the main villain of the story, Dr. Deckard, is also a really interesting character because in the story, Deckard has a mask which he puts on whenever he kills people, and in the story, the mask actually talks to him, and it's implied that he might be schizophrenic or might have split personality disorder, which makes it kind of ironic that he's also a psychologist. Now, in 1990, Cabal was made into a movie called Nightbreed, which I have right here. Now, the movie Nightbreed is actually written and directed by Clive Barker. Now, I always enjoyed Nightbreed myself. The best way I can describe this movie is basically if Clive Barker did a Tim Burton movie, that's probably how this movie would be. And maybe I'm just saying that because Danny Elfman does actually do the score for this movie, but I always felt like this movie really did have kind of a Tim Burton kind of feel to it. But I always enjoyed Nightbreed myself, but apparently Clive Barker is not very happy with this movie. Like, apparently a lot of it was like studio interference, and Clive Barker really didn't get to make the movie he wanted to make. But I know there's been a director's cut of this movie which came out recently, I think, called Nightbreed the Cabal cut or something. I had never seen that version. I've only seen this version of the movie, but I always enjoyed Nightbreed myself, and in the movie, Boone is played by Craig Sheffer, who is an actor that I actually like. I always found him to be a pretty underrated actor, and in the movie, the villain, Dr. Deckard, is actually played by David Cronenberg, who is one of my favorite directors. But yeah, that's my review on Cabal by Clive Barker. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend giving it a read, and bye.